There is a kind of ache that does not announce its origin. It simply sits inside you, somewhere between the chest and the throat, and you carry it through the day like a stone in your pocket, half forgetting it is there, then suddenly remembering when you set something down, and your hand brushes it again. It is not sharp, it is not fresh. It is old in the way that certain things are old inside a person, not because they happened a long time ago, but because they have been there long enough to feel like furniture, like a feature of the interior landscape, rather than a wound still in the process of healing. April 16th, 2026 is the day the sky reaches into that pocket, not to take the stone away. That is not what this day does, and it would be dishonest to suggest otherwise. The sky today is not handing you a resolution, or the cinematic moment in which something long carried is suddenly lifted by the grace of an exact planetary configuration. What the sky today is doing is something quieter and, in the end, more useful. It is making the stone visible. It is turning it toward the light so that you can see, possibly for the first time with clear and undefended eyes, what it actually is that you have been carrying, how it got there, and most importantly, what it has been trying to teach you by remaining. This is the work of Sun conjunct Chiron in Aries on April 16, 2026. The Sun, which has been moving through Aries throughout this entire season, arrives today at the exact degree of Chiron, the wounded healer, the asteroid that astrologers have recognized since its discovery in 1977 as carrying very particular questions about the wounds we sustain in our early experience of being a self in the world, and what we do with those wounds across the course of a lifetime. The conjunction is exact today, meaning the two bodies occupy the same degree of Aries simultaneously. When the Sun, the principle of conscious identity and illuminating attention, arrives at Chiron's position, the wound is not operating in the background. It is operating in full light. There is something else happening today that makes this Chiron conjunction unusual and worth your sustained attention. Mars, the planet of will and the drive to move through life on your own terms, is forming a sextile to Pluto today. And tonight Mercury, which entered Aries just 2 days ago, aligns in conjunction with Neptune in the early degrees of Aries. 3 distinct planetary conversations happening in the same sky on the same day, 2 days before a solar eclipse that has been building its pressure across the entire week. The balsamic moon, waning crescent, at less than 3% illumination, is about to disappear entirely before the solar eclipse resets the lunar cycle in Aries tomorrow. The thinnest, quietest moon phase is upon us. The moon at its most retreated, its least visible, its most interior. And yet underneath that quiet lunar surface, Mars is moving through Pluto's field with strategic purpose. Mercury is dissolving into Neptune's dream water, and the Sun is standing directly on the wound, illuminating it from the inside out. Today is a day of seeing, of being seen in the places you have most carefully arranged not to be seen, even by yourself. And the seeing, however uncomfortable it arrives, is not the sky's way of exposing you. It is the sky's way of finally giving you full access to what you have been carrying, so that the solar eclipse arriving on April 17th can initiate a new cycle not over the top of an unexamined wound, but in genuine, honest reckoning with what the wound has been asking of you all along. The stone in your pocket is not a burden, it is a lesson that has not yet been received. Today is the day it gets to be received. Your soul chose this lifetime with intention. Your birth chart is the map. A personal reading built from the exact moment and place of your birth decodes your sun, moon, and rising, dives into your soul's focus area in love, career, or spiritual path, surfaces hidden karmic patterns, and delivers a month-by-month forecast for 2026 as an audio reading and a detailed PDF report delivered to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is below. Before you can understand what Sun conjunct Chiron means for you today, you need to understand what Chiron actually is, because the word wound, which is most commonly associated with this body in popular astrology, does not quite capture the full range of what Chiron represents. The wound is where the story starts. it is not where the story ends. Chiron in Greek mythology was the centaur, half human and half horse, the teacher of heroes and healer of warriors, the figure who carried in his body both the wildness of his animal nature and the cultivated wisdom of a physician. He was wounded by a poisoned arrow, and the wound, because of the particular nature of his divine lineage, could not be healed. He carried it for the rest of his immortal life, and yet he continued to teach, continued to heal others, continued to hold the wisdom that came directly from the experience of carrying something incurable. This is the most important part of the Chiron story that gets lost when it is reduced to a simple symbol of pain. Chiron was the wounded healer, not because the wound was eventually cured, but because the wound itself became the source of his greatest wisdom. He understood the experience of suffering because he was inside it. He could offer something to those in his care that someone who had never suffered could not offer, which was the particular quality of seeing that comes only from having genuinely been there. In a natal chart, Chiron's position shows the area of life in which you carry something analogous to that immortal wound. Not necessarily a wound that can never heal, but one that requires a different relationship with healing than ordinary cures provide. The Chiron wound generally does not resolve through simple time or straightforward effort. It requires a willingness to look directly at it, to stop pretending it is not there, to allow the experience of having been wounded in this particular way to become, gradually and genuinely, a source of wisdom rather than simply a source of pain. When the sun transits over the natal or transiting position of Chiron, it brings the principle of conscious illuminating attention into direct contact with whatever Chiron is holding. The sun does not heal the wound, but it reveals it with a clarity that makes healing possible in a way that the habitual management of the wound never quite achieves. Today, that illumination is happening in Aries, the sign of the self, the sign of beginning and identity, and the original impulse of the individual before it has learned to shape itself around the world's requirements. The sun is standing on Chiron in Aries, which means the wound being illuminated today is specifically the wound to selfhood. The wound to the sense of having the right to exist as you actually are, to take up the space your genuine nature requires, to begin things from the place of your real desire rather than from the place of what is safe or approved. Chiron has been moving through Aries for years, doing slow cumulative work on the wound to the self that the collective carries. The individual healing available today is not separate from that larger work. It is a personal chapter within a longer story. What you are being asked to see today is where you have been operating from a wounded sense of your own right to be fully yourself, where you have been shrinking, deferring, accommodating, and performing in the service of a world that has not always confirmed your validity, and what today offers in the particular quality of light that the sun, in exact conjunction with Chiron, provides, is the chance to see that wound clearly enough to begin choosing differently. Not because the wound disappears, but because what you do with it can change once you have truly seen it for what it is. At the same time that the sun is standing directly on Chiron, Mars is forming an exact sextile to Pluto. These are two very different energies, and what they are doing today in conversation with each other adds a dimension to the day that the Chiron conjunction alone does not carry. Mars is in Aries. Mars rules Aries. This means the planet of action, drive, will, and assertion is operating from its home sign with full access to its own natural strength. Mars in Aries does not equivocate. It does not wait for permission. It does not soften its intention to make it more palatable for the audience. Mars in Aries is the principle of will at its most uncompromised, its most instinctive, its most nakedly directional. Pluto is in Aquarius, continuing the long generational transit that began in 2023. Pluto in Aquarius is interested in power in a new way, not the concentrated power of a single authority at the top of a hierarchy, but the distributed, networked collective power that emerges when systems are reorganized from their foundations. Pluto is not interested in surface adjustment. It is interested in what is actually happening in the foundations of things, and it has the capacity to work at that foundational level in ways that no other planetary influence quite matches. A sextile between Mars and Pluto is an aspect of cooperative opportunity. It does not force engagement with its gifts, but makes those gifts available if you choose to reach for them. And the gift that Mars sextile Pluto offers today is extraordinary in the context of a day when the Sun is conjunct Chiron and the wound is being illuminated. Mars, operating with full Aries strength and directness, has access today to Pluto's deep transformative power. Not Pluto's relentless pressure of a hard aspect, but Pluto's depth, its capacity to reach below the surface of things and make real structural change rather than surface adjustment. Its willingness to understand what is actually being held in the foundations of a situation. What this means practically, in the context of a day when the Chiron wound is being illuminated, is that the action available today goes beyond simply acknowledging what is being seen. It moves into the territory of actually reworking something from the ground up in the space the wound has been occupying. Mars brings the will, Pluto provides the depth. Together they offer the capacity to do something with the Chiron illumination that is genuinely structural. A change in how you relate to the wound and what you build in the space it has been occupying. This is not a day for half measures. The sextile to Pluto is an invitation to bring the full directed force of Mars in Aries to bear on the deepest level of what the Chiron conjunction is revealing. To not stop at the seeing, to allow the seeing to become a decision, to allow the decision to become a genuine, grounded, Pluto deep shift in the foundational territory of your own sense of self and worth and right to exist fully. The combination of Sun conjunct Chiron with Mars sextile Pluto is a remarkable configuration for a day immediately preceding a solar eclipse. What the eclipse is going to initiate in the territory of Aries selfhood, it initiates in someone who has spent this day seeing the wound clearly and choosing, with the full directed force of Mars in Aries and the deep structural capacity of Pluto's sextile, to do something genuinely different with it. That is a qualitatively different new beginning than a solar eclipse can offer without this preparation. Today is preparation in the most serious sense, not the passive preparation of waiting and receiving. The active preparation of seeing and choosing and allowing real depth of change in the place that has most needed it. As if the day were not already doing enough, tonight Mercury aligns in exact conjunction with Neptune in the early degrees of Aries. Two planets that would seem, at first consideration, to be an unusual pairing. Mercury is the planet of the rational mind, of language and analysis, and the quick, sharp movement between one thought and the next. Neptune is the planet of dissolution, of the dream world, of everything that resists the clean lines of logical organization. When they meet, thinking and dreaming become temporarily indistinguishable from each other. Mercury entered Aries 2 days ago, fresh from its transit through Pisces, still carrying something of the oceanic softness of that immersion. And now, before it has had time to fully settle into the fire's sharpness, it meets Neptune, which is also in the early degrees of Aries. The meeting happens in the territory of new beginning, in the sign of the self's first impulse, but with the veil between the conscious and the unconscious mind still relatively thin. The Mercury-Neptune conjunction in Aries tonight produces a particular quality of mental experience. It does not make the mind vague or confused, though it can look like confusion from the outside. What it actually does is expand the mind's access beyond its ordinary rational borders. Suddenly the thoughts that arrive are not only the thoughts the deliberate reasoning mind has been working toward. They are also the thoughts that have been circulating in the deeper registers, in the dream space, in the intuitive field that Mercury's rational functions do not usually permit to have a voice. Tonight those thoughts have a voice, and the voice may be surprising. The Mercury-Neptune conjunction is known for producing inspired thinking, for dissolving the mental blocks that prevent creative solutions from arriving, for generating the kind of ideas that feel like they came from somewhere beyond the ordinary thinking mind. In Aries, there is an additional quality. Aries is the sign of the first thought. The thought before the thought has been filtered and edited into something presentable. Mercury meeting Neptune in Aries is the first thought meeting the dream. The instinctive mind and the visionary mind finding each other in the same space. What this offers in practical terms is the possibility of receiving tonight a kind of clarity that is not the sharp rational clarity of Mercury in Aries at its most direct. It is a deeper, stranger, less immediately explicable clarity, the kind that arrives as a knowing before it arrives as an argument, the kind your intuition recognizes as true before your analysis has assembled the supporting evidence. In the context of the day that the Sun conjunct Chiron has set up, in which the wound has been illuminated, and Mars sextile Pluto has made real structural action possible, the Mercury-Neptune conjunction tonight arrives as the visionary supplement. The part of the day's work that does not operate through deliberate effort, but through the dream logic of an open mind. What you receive tonight in the space between waking and sleeping, in the half-formed thoughts of the late evening, in the moment when you stop trying to figure something out and it suddenly arrives, is a transmission from the intersection of your conscious mind and your deepest intuitive knowing. Do not dismiss it because it does not follow logical rules. The Mercury-Neptune conjunction is not offering you logic. It is offering you vision. And vision is what the new beginning initiated by tomorrow's eclipse will most need to orient itself. The balsamic moon has retreated to the barest sliver of light, 2.4% illuminated, a waning crescent in Aries. The thinnest moon is not a moon of action or visibility. It is a moon of interior work, of the quiet final processing that happens in the last hours before a new cycle begins. Combined with the Mercury-Neptune conjunction tonight is profoundly interior. The external world may not see much of what is happening in you, but what is happening in you is real and substantial and will shape the quality of your experience in the days ahead. Rest matters tonight. Dreams matter tonight. The Mercury-Neptune conjunction is transmitting something to anyone willing to receive it, and the reception requires the willingness to stop operating in the deliberate, directed mode, long enough for what is already arriving to actually land. April 16th is the final day before the solar eclipse in Aries. In the lunar cycle, the balsamic moon day carries a very specific function. It is the day of maximum release, minimum lunar influence, the most interior experience the month has to offer. The day when the old cycle is doing its final metabolizing, when what has been learned, accumulated, struggled with, and gradually understood across the preceding 29 days is completing its processing before the new cycle begins. A balsamic moon day before an ordinary new moon already carries unusual interior depth. A balsamic moon day before a solar eclipse is something different in degree and quality, because the solar eclipse that arrives tomorrow is not initiating simply the next lunar month. It is initiating a new chapter in the territory of Aries, in the territory of self and identity and beginning that will operate across the next 18 months to 2 years. The interior work of today, the Chiron wound being illuminated, the Mars-Pluto strategic depth made available, the Mercury-Neptune visionary transmission arriving tonight, is the final preparation for that 18-month chapter. Not the intellectual preparation of knowing what is coming, the interior preparation of having genuinely done the work of seeing what has been operating in your inner life without your full and honest attention. 18 months is a long chapter. Long enough that whatever pattern you bring to its beginning will be the pattern you are living inside for a significant stretch of time. The solar eclipse in Aries is initiating a chapter of selfhood, of identity, of the self that is allowed to exist without constant modification for the comfort of those watching. If you arrive at that initiation having genuinely sat with the Chiron wound today, having allowed the Mars-Pluto sextile to do its structural work, having received the Mercury-Neptune transmission with an open and unhurried mind, you will carry something into that chapter that no one who bypassed today's work will have. The seeing available today is not comfortable. Most genuine seeing isn't, but it is honest. And the quality of honesty available on a balsamic moon day with the Sun on Chiron and Mars working with Pluto is not the honesty of judgment or self-criticism. It is the honesty of a person who has decided that the thing they have been carrying in their pocket long enough to forget about deserves to be held up in the full light of a conscious sun. Deserves to be met with the courage that Mars in Aries is offering today and the depth that Pluto is making available. What you do with today is what you bring to tomorrow. And what you bring to tomorrow is what the next chapter of your life is built from. This is always true, but it is especially true when tomorrow is a solar eclipse and the chapter being built is measured in years rather than days. The balsamic moon is quiet. The exterior life asks little. The interior life asks everything. Today is a day for the interior, for the honesty that requires no audience, for the work of seeing, choosing, and receiving that happens entirely in the space of your own awareness. No one has to know what is happening in you today. The work is private. The eclipse will make it visible. But the work itself is yours, happening now, in the quiet of the thinnest moon. The Sun conjunct Chiron, Mars sextile Pluto, and Mercury conjunct Neptune speak differently to each of the 12 signs depending on which area of life these energies are activating. Understanding where the day's energy lands for your sign gives you the most practical entry point into what is being offered. For Aries, the Sun conjunct Chiron lands in your first house of identity, the most direct and personal placement this conjunction can have for any sign. The wound being illuminated today is the most fundamental one Aries carries. The wound to the sense of having the right to simply be. To exist fully as yourself without needing to earn that right through achievement or the careful management of other people's impressions. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the strategic capacity to make a real structural shift in how you answer the question of whether your genuine self is acceptable. Mercury conjunct Neptune tonight delivers a vision of what your life looks like when you stop seeking that confirmation and simply begin proceeding from the assumption that it is. For Taurus, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your 12th house, the house of the private interior and what operates below the surface of your visible life. Something circulating in the background of your experience, a quiet ache you have learned to move around rather than through, is being lit up today by the Sun's conjunction. Venus in your own sign is your anchor, reminding you that what surfaces from the deep interior deepens rather than contradicts your genuine sense of worth. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the capacity to do real transformative work in this private territory. Mercury Neptune tonight may speak through dreams, through the half-formed thoughts that arrive as you release the day. Let them arrive without editing them into something more manageable. For Gemini, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your 11th house of community, shared vision, and the friendships you move through the world alongside. The Gemini wound around belonging often has to do with the question, am I genuinely part of this, or am I performing membership? The Sun today is asking you to feel honestly which connections in your life you belong to, genuinely, and which ones you have been maintaining through the performance of being what those groups need you to be. Mars sextile Pluto gives you clarity about this distinction and the capacity to act on it. Mercury, your ruling planet conjunct Neptune tonight delivers a vision of the community you are genuinely meant to be part of, distinct from the communities you have been working to remain acceptable to. For Cancer, the Sun conjunct Chiron is illuminating your 10th house of career and visible contribution. The wound here for Cancer is often about the experience of being seen in the public sphere in a way that conflicts with the deep private interior. The 10th house Chiron wound asks whether it is possible to be genuinely visible without losing the private self, whether the public role can hold the full depth of who Cancer is without requiring the most real parts to be left at home. Jupiter in your sign is amplifying everything you feel today. Let it. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the capacity to make a real structural shift in how you show up professionally. Mercury Neptune tonight is delivering an inspired vision of work that actually holds both the visible and the deep simultaneously. For Leo, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your 9th house of belief, philosophy, and the frameworks you use to understand what your life means. The ninth house Chiron wound for Leo is often connected to the question of whether you have the right to believe in the significance of your own story when the broader world may not always confirm it. Today, the sun illuminates the specific place where your belief in your own importance has been most questioned and most carefully defended. Mars sextile Pluto gives you access to transformative work that goes all the way down to the root of that belief system. Mercury Neptune tonight may feel like a moment of genuine philosophical revelation, a knowing that arrives complete rather than assembled piece by piece. For Virgo, the Sun conjunct Chiron today is activating your 8th house of deep transformation, shared resources, and the territory of life that requires genuine vulnerability to enter. The 8th house Chiron wound for Virgo is often connected to trust, specifically the experience of having been in a position of genuine vulnerability and finding it not safe. The resulting strategy of maintaining careful control over how close anything or anyone gets to the most undefended parts of the inner life. What the Sun illuminates today is the specific mechanics of that control strategy, where it began and at what cost it has been operating. Mars sextile Pluto in the context of your 8th house is one of the most powerful configurations available for genuine foundational change in this territory. The offer today is of real structural shift in how you relate to vulnerability. For Libra, the Sun conjunct Chiron is illuminating your 7th house of partnership and the fundamental question of how you show up as a self in the presence of another self. Libra often learned early that the way to maintain connection is to become what the other person needs you to be. The Sun today is standing on the specific place in your relationship life where that wound operates, where you shrink, where you defer, where your own sense of self becomes hazy in the presence of someone else's more confident selfhood. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the strategic force to make a real shift in a specific relationship dynamic. Mercury Neptune tonight delivers a vision of what genuine mutuality, in which two full selves are genuinely present with each other rather than one organizing itself around the other, could actually feel like in your life. For Scorpio, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your 6th house of daily practice, body, and the small consistent choices that accumulate over time into the actual conditions of a life. The 6th house Chiron wound for Scorpio is often about the wound to the body's sense of sufficiency, some early experience of the body being inadequate, or a source of vulnerability rather than power. This wound frequently produces a complex relationship with health practices and daily routine, swinging between excessive discipline and complete release in a way that reflects the underlying wound rather than genuine relationship with the body's actual needs. What the Sun illuminates today is the specific shape of this pattern in your daily life. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the capacity to restructure something foundational in your daily practice from a place of honest relationship with your actual physical self. For Sagittarius, the Sun conjunct Chiron is illuminating your 5th house of creative expression and authentic joy, the dimension of life that exists for its own sake. The 5th house Chiron wound for Sagittarius is often about the experience of having had the natural, expansive joy of the creative self curtailed at some formative point through the slow accumulation of messages about what is sensible and practical. The wound here is specifically around permission for joy that doesn't justify itself, for creative expression that has no utilitarian purpose beyond the pleasure of making it. The Sun today illuminates the specific way this permission has been withheld in your experience. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the drive and depth to make a real structural change in your relationship to creative permission. Mercury Neptune tonight is delivering a transmission of pure creative vision, something that wants to be made, and the only question is whether you will let yourself receive it. For Capricorn, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your 4th house of home, emotional foundation, and the private interior that underlies everything you build in the outer world. The 4th house Chiron wound for Capricorn often has roots in the early experience of whether belonging required performance and achievement, or whether it was simply given. Capricorn frequently builds an extraordinary outer life as a response to the inner wound of not having been simply accepted as enough. What the sun illuminates today in your fourth house is the specific shape of that wound and how it continues to operate in your adult life. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the will and depth to make a genuine structural shift in the emotional foundation itself, not the outer architecture, but the inner ground. Mercury Neptune tonight offers a vision of what genuine belonging that does not require performance, could actually feel like. For Aquarius, the Sun conjunct Chiron is illuminating your third house of communication, daily exchange, and the quality of the mental environment in which you spend your ordinary life. The third house Chiron wound for Aquarius is often connected to the experience of being too different or too ahead of the thinking in the immediate environment to be genuinely understood by the people closest to home. Aquarius frequently carries a wound around the ordinary conversational world, the question of whether it is safe to be fully intellectually present with the people in the immediate vicinity. What the sun illuminates today is the specific mechanics of this withholding, where you compress, where you simplify, where you speak less than you think. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the capacity to make a real change in how you bring your full thinking into the ordinary conversational world. Mercury Neptune tonight offers a transmission about what communication in which you are fully present rather than partially present could feel like. For Pisces, the Sun conjunct Chiron is activating your second house of worth, resources, and the fundamental question of what you believe about what you deserve. The second house Chiron wound for Pisces is one of the most quietly pervasive in the zodiac, operating in the territory where the deep spiritual generosity of Pisces and the practical necessities of material existence must find a way to coexist. Pisces frequently carries a wound around deserving, around whether receiving, as distinct from giving, is spiritually acceptable. The wound produces a pattern in which Pisces gives generously and receives with difficulty, in which the material conditions of the life remain below what the actual depth of value deserves. The sun today is illuminating this wound specifically. Mars sextile Pluto gives you the strategic will and transformative depth to make a real foundational shift in your relationship to receiving and to worth. Mercury Neptune tonight delivers a vision of what a life whose conditions actually match your depth of value could look and feel like. Receive it without apology. There's a particular quality of spaciousness that arrives after a genuine seeing, not the spaciousness of resolution, not the clean relief of a problem solved or a wound fully healed. That kind of resolution is not what this day offers. What arrives after genuine seeing is the spaciousness of no longer needing to manage what you can no longer pretend you have not seen. When you carry something in your pocket long enough without looking at it, a significant amount of your unconscious energy goes toward not looking, toward finding ways to move through your day without your hand brushing its shape in a way that reminds you too clearly of what is there. This management is not deliberate, it is not even fully conscious, but it costs something. It occupies a part of the interior bandwidth that could otherwise be available for the actual work of your life, for the genuine quality of your attention in your relationships and your creative work and your daily choices. After the seeing, that management energy becomes available for something else. This is why the Sun conjunct Chiron, uncomfortable as it sometimes is not a day to simply endure. It is a day to receive. The seeing available today is not a penalty. It is a gift in the precise sense that a gift is something offered rather than demanded. The sky is offering you a clear look at what has been running in the background. Whether you accept the look is genuinely up to you. But if you do accept it, if you let the day do its work without too quickly redirecting your attention toward more comfortable energies, what you will find on the other side is that the stone in your pocket weighs less than it did before, not because it has been removed, but because you are now in conscious relationship with it rather than unconscious management of it. And the difference between those two ways of carrying something is enormous. The solar eclipse that arrives on April 17th will not ask you to have resolved the Chiron wound before it initiates a new chapter. The sky's not waiting for your healing to be complete before it moves forward, but the eclipse will initiate a chapter that is shaped, in its most foundational qualities, by the state in which you arrived at its threshold, and the state available to you today, the state of having genuinely seen, having used the Mars-Pluto sextile to make a real structural choice, having received the Mercury-Neptune transmission with an unhurried and open mind, is a better state in which to begin a new chapter than the state of continuing to manage the unseen wound while the new cycle begins above it. The wound is not your whole story. Chiron never taught that. The wounded healer understood that the wound is the doorway to the most particular and genuine wisdom available. The people who have traveled through a wound honestly can offer something to those in a similar place that no one untouched by that territory can offer. The wound, seen clearly and carried with conscious awareness rather than unconscious management, becomes the source of something valuable in a way that the wound avoided and maneuvered around cannot become. This is the Chiron teaching. This is what the sun illuminates today in the most honest light the sky can offer. And on the other side of the illumination, the eclipse is waiting to begin something new. Not something that erases what came before. Something built with genuine knowledge of what came before, that uses that knowledge rather than paying the ongoing cost of not having it. The solar eclipse is ready. The new chapter is ready. And after today, so are you. Today is the day the stone gets to be seen. Tomorrow, the new chapter begins. And the new chapter will know what the old one contained, which means it will be able to build from something real. That is everything the sky is asking of you today. Only the honest look, only the genuine receiving, only the willingness to let what has always been there finally be seen in full light. If this message found you at the right moment, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. The eclipse arrives tomorrow, and everything the sky has been building across this extraordinary week of April 2026 reaches its formal initiation. Stay here for it.